Welcome to another MotorTown related video. Today I'm here to tell you guys about cargo reward scaling in the game, how it's implemented right now, why it kind of is a necessary evil, and what I would like to see changed about it, because honestly, while I think it's necessary to have in the game, currently it's having a few flaws here and there. And at the very least, I want you guys to walk away with a better understanding of how the system currently works and why it's necessary. So we are going to start with that and going in depth on that discussion. And my own idea for how to improve the system is going to come towards the end of the video. So to start out with, what is cargo scaling and why is it necessary? Cargo scaling means that, or cargo reward scaling to be more precise, means that if you have a small truck that can maybe take like 5 boxes and you have a large semi truck that can take up to 50 or something, you don't get 10 times the reward for 10 times the items transported, because that would be very difficult to balance in terms of your payout. At that point, if you had no cargo scaling and twice the amount of items transported would result in twice the amount of payout, or twice the amount of pay, it would mean that you could basically do one of two extremes or something in the middle, either balancing for the small trucks so that they get a decent payout, but at that point, well, the large truck is going to make 10 times the amount, and that means a huge amount in an hour with every single delivery, and likely getting millions upon millions and turning any semi-truck driver into a super rich who still doesn't really see the reason to ever go back to the smaller vehicle. You can also try to balance it to the very top end, so making sure that people don't just become millionaires by being semi-truck drivers, at least not within a few hours. But at that point, the person using the starter vehicle or buying a cheap pickup truck will likely be able to make barely enough to even afford the car's fuel in order to keep doing the deliveries. You could also go for something in the middle, but you will still find somebody making either too much or too little money to really come by, and it's just that's the major issue here. So cargo scaling just skims off the top of larger vehicles reward just to make everything a bit more balanced and make sure that while people get better rewards for larger deliveries, they're just not running away with way too much money in the end. And that's something that this system definitely achieves, and that's also a reason why I think we need it in some way, shape, or form. Before talking about the downside, let's now get in depth about how it really works and what it does specifically. And for that, we need to start by explaining one very important metric here, and that is the x-axis of my graph over here, the specific capacity. Specific capacity for me means that you take any type of cargo in this game and compare that to any type of vehicle that can hold that cargo, and the specific capacity is how much of that type of item fits into that type of truck. So we are not just looking at the overall capacity of that vehicle, but also how large the cargo is, and therefore how many of that one cargo type fit into that vehicle. Very important distinction, because this means that depending on what you load into especially box trucks and flatbed trucks, it's going to do different kinds of cargo scaling based on the size of the type of cargo you're looking at. A single pallet, of which you may not be able to hold as many, is going to be scaled differently with the same vehicle than if you were to try and load the small boxes. And the way this all works in more detail has to do with the formula down here. And for this, I need to give a shout out to Raging413 on the MotorTown Discord, because he managed to come up with a formula. I tried this myself, given a few example points on the graph, but I just couldn't really figure out the correct formatting of a formula. I didn't know that a square root was involved here, but let's take a look at it in all of its glory. We take the square root of the specific capacity divided by the specific capacity and take that times 100%. And that's going to give me a scaling factor in percent. So this is a more general way of looking at things without having any one specific cargo type in mind. It's basically working for everything that has cargo scaling applied to it. So yeah, this is the general formula. And now that I finally have it, I could go ahead and do the entire calculation here to get the graphs, and this is the basis of which I'm going off for the entire explanation here. So to start out with, we are going to take a look at the blue graph here, the values for which I also have on the left. So specific capacity, my A column over here, that's the x-axis right here. And pay per item, this is in percent, and this represents the values for the blue line, which is why it's also in light blue. If you go to any factory or other industry and look at it on foot, you will always get the unscaled values. So that's 100% because theoretically, at the very most, if at all, you could be holding one of those items. You're not going to be able to stack stuff in your hand. So that's always a good way to start out with. But if you now approach the factory with a vehicle that can actually hold multiple of the same item, you are going to notice that the value of those items is going to be much less than your unscaled on-foot 100% value. And this is where some of the confusion and frustration starts to come in, because it always feels like you are not getting the most out of it no matter what you are doing. But that's just because the game doesn't really fully explain itself. The thing that you're always going to notice is this line down here, and it only goes further down the more capacity or specific capacity your vehicle has. So yeah, that's the thing that's pretty obvious to the people in game, because that's what you end up seeing. And the thing where people can really get frustrated with is if they maybe have a vehicle that can hold up to 5 of a specific item, and then decide to want to do the job with a larger vehicle that can maybe hold up to 20. And now they notice that the value of that item has just gone down significantly. And yeah, that's where they may be feeling a bit betrayed, because without knowing the math behind it, it's very hard to even estimate how much the whole thing is going to diminish with higher capacity. And even worse than that, while there are a lot of vehicles and types of cargos now that make it easy to find out the specific capacity, for example for fuel, you always know that a 40-ton tanker trailer will have capacity for 40 units. So it's going to be over here. The 6 or 7-ton Brutus tanker or Limousin tanker is going to be somewhere in this range. With a lot of other stuff, like any flatbed cargo or boxcar cargo, you don't really know how many things you can pack in there. So that's always a bit weird to find out, and you're just basically going to have to trial and error the entire thing. And also, depending on how much you load, you might not even be able to load as much as you could theoretically do. But yeah, that's one thing. Determining how much your specific capacity isn't always straightforward, adding to the confusion. The second thing is, and this is where the current system is working amazingly well on paper, but very hard to follow in actual practice, and that's the orange line. The orange line is basically taking the cargo value down here for each specific capacity and multiplying it by how many items you can load. So if I have, for example, 20-ton tanker trailer, whatever, doesn't exist anymore, but I hope it makes a return at some point, or at least a remodeled version. Single item value is going to be 22% of what you would get if you look at it from just on foot. So that's looking pretty useless at that point. However, once you fully load up that tanker trailer, you go up to almost 450% of the original value. And as you look at the curve here, you can clearly see that you are going to make more money the higher your capacity is. The caveat here is that only applies if you are able to fully load your vehicle. Otherwise, you are going to make diminishing returns. So let's keep it with tanker trailers. Currently, the 40-ton tanker trailer has a cargo scaling value of 15.81%, so even slightly below 16%, meaning that in order to even get back up to 100, you need to get between 6 and 7 items in order to even just get back to this point. If you want to go to the same value as you would get for 20 or for a fully loaded 20-ton trailer, that would mean almost filling it up to around 3/4, I would say, just looking at the graph right here. So you would need to transport only around, or just around 30 tons of it to even get even with a 20-ton trailer. And only everything above that would be a net profit for you compared to using the smaller trailer. That's a bit of an issue in my opinion, because really unless you're fully able to or mostly able to load up your trailer, you might be making less money than if you were to pick a smaller vehicle. And it's even worse in some cases because not every cargo at every place will even have enough to fully load whatever vehicle you come with. Usually the refinery is pretty easy for that, you just do a few more supply runs, but it might still be a problem, especially when you look at oil, which is harder to produce. Or at least it used to be, I don't know how it works right now, I haven't done it in a while. But for especially small and mid-sized vehicles, when it comes to all the residential stuff, it usually only comes in very small amounts. So if you get a larger vehicle, you get less money per item, and maybe you only get 4 or 5 items, so you are not even making as much as you would for a single item with a very tiny vehicle, like loading it into a hatchback or something. So that's a bit of a problem with this system, and this is where my own idea would come into play. I hope I have everything else explained so far. But basically, yeah, if you look at the left columns here, we have specific capacity, we have the pay per item, and we have the pay for the full load, which is once again the values for the orange line here. And once you have it presented like something like this right here, it starts to make sense that you are really getting a decent additional reward out of the game once you get a larger vehicle. But in game, since you are more going to be presented with a line down here, it doesn't really feel like that. And if you know that maybe the default value would be like 5k per item, and now with your vehicle that maybe has capacity for 25, you're only getting 20%, so 1k. It always feels like you are getting the short end of the stick for the entire deal, just because you don't always necessarily see in the same breath that your overall capacity is actually going up to 500% at this point. The potential for you to make money is 5 times higher than with a tiny vehicle or transporting the whole thing on foot. Because this side of the equation isn't really conveyed by the game. So, here comes my idea. I take issue with the whole thing about needing to fill up a whole lot of your vehicle in order to even break even with a smaller vehicle. And I also think that this entire part of the equation should be much more obvious. So my idea is that cargo scaling should apply to the cargo you have loaded, not to the potential capacity for how much you could load, but really just the things that you have on board already and are about to add to your vehicle. That means the first item, whatever you pick, is going to be 100% of the value. Just like that. And yes, I'm going to follow this curve here because I think the values are actually working out in a good way. So the second item that you pick, that's getting its price reduced. You're going to see a reduced value for that even before picking it up. It's going to be reduced in the list. Unless you go there on foot, because at that point, I mean, you can't really expect much from that. But yeah, the second value, or the value for the second item, is going to be 41.42%, meaning the difference between the 100% you start with the first item and the difference to the second step over here. So this entire thing is going to fully follow this line, the orange one. And that means that first one 100%, second one adds another less than 42%, third one adding another slightly less than 32% on top, and so on and so forth. And that's something that you are going to experience with every item that has cargo scaling on every single vehicle that can transport it. Meaning that you will notice this much sooner, much more consistent, and therefore grow a bit more accustomed to it. But you will also know that every time you load another item, you may get less and less additional money, but you're always going to get a net positive effect from that. So this is how I would like to see this entire thing changed. Because the other version, as it is currently, if you go with a certain tanker type, you basically build a ladder up here and you start at the bottom and you climb each little sprung of a ladder with every single item that you put in hopes of getting to the top value at some point. But with my system, you would always be at the top value of that specific capacity. So having half loads is not going to be punishing for you. It's just going to work out like that. And there's another potential benefit here, because instead of just applying the cargo scaling to everything equally, or just let's say if you load one item, everything is going to go down to the lower percentage right away. Instead of doing that for everything at once, you could do so for just copies of the same item. So something that goes from this location to that destination is going to get this cargo scaling applied. But if you now take another item going to another place, the first item is going to start back at 100% and then do the same scaling curve. Meaning that for another easy example, let's talk about 40-ton tanker trailers again. Let's say you want to split it and take half your load to one place and half the load to another one. So 20 units loaded is going to give you that 400, almost 50%. And if you then go to another location, you are going to start back here, but kind of put it on top again. And that means at the end, your reward is going to be around 900% of the original values. Likely going to be a bit different because of distance rewards and all of that. But yeah, you are making a lot of money there just by diversifying your end destination, which makes perfect sense in my mind, because in the end, that means going to two places, and that's going to be more effort than going to only a single one. And yeah, you could also just go to theoretically 40 different places, meaning that you get 400%, no, 40 or 4000% the reward. But going to 40 different places is also going to be very exhausting if there even are enough destinations to begin with. But that would be the other extreme, and you could theoretically choose where you want to go and how you want to handle it. If that turns out to be too overpowered, maybe there could be something else where the second good that you load doesn't start at 100%, but maybe it's somewhere up here already, so that maybe you only get a slightly better reward. But I think this would be really helpful, especially once again for smaller vehicles, because with that cargo, once you go below the size of pallets, so a lot of different crates, small boxes and all of that, you will end up with a lot of items that don't have much, that don't have a high amount. So you're never going to fill up your truck with 10 of the same type of boxes, and therefore you're going to do a lot of extra work, but not for extra reward with the current system. And with my system, you would get extra money for that. So yeah, that's the overall idea. I hope I made it clear on what I want to do here and how I would like to see the entire thing adjusted. Let me know what you think about it. But I think following this line would feel much more rewarding, much more clear. And yeah, you would likely also need to explain it to people. So maybe having a tooltip somewhere at the different industries that tells you that bundling up multiple shipments to the same location is going to cut down on the reward, but the system itself should make it pretty clear that you are still going to get more reward for more the more you transport, even if it is not in a linear scaling way. But yeah, that's all that I got to say about the thing. I hope it was at least useful and at the very least helped you guys understand the current system a bit more. I gotta say, for myself, having this graph right here really helps to understand just how much more money you make with larger shipments and how the entire thing works out. I think this is even more important than just having the one at the bottom here. But know that once you pick a specific item and vehicle, you are going to be locked into a vertical here, and you are going to come out somewhere in between here, depending on how many items you put onto your vehicle. Anyways, enough about that. Thanks for watching. I hope it was somewhat useful, and see you guys next time. Till then, have a good one. Bye bye.